So we're seeking to have a robust conversation about Southern communities' centrality in changing their own futures, and in particular the ways that the Academy and philanthropy can assist and support Southern communities in making decisions and allocating resources as they go about that work. We're also centering the arts and humanities in that conversation because we believe in humble listening and storytelling as critical to our ability to speak across difference.
I'm reading a little book called The Geography of Risk by a fellow named Gilbert Gall, G-A-U-L. I don't know if y'all know his work. But his book is really about how costly climate change, weather events are to American taxpayers. And he's typically focused on coastal development along the barrier islands up and down the East Coast. But he makes the point that we're sort of operating in a world where there's not a national consensus about what we should do, and administration after administration has failed to develop a federal policy that really tells us the way forward. So he says this in his introduction: leaders from New York City to Miami to Galveston, Texas, have been left to devise their own solutions. Some are thinking deeply about what it means to live with rising water, torrential rain bombs, and staggeringly destructive hurricanes. So I think that kind of paints an image of what we're going to try to talk about here, which is a group of local people figuring out how to come together, in this instance, to protect their city. The South, as we all know, is pretty much a coastal region with the exception of a few states. So this recent hurricane, Dorian, that comes up the coast and sadly decimates the Bahamas, winds up, I think, being more destructive in South and North Carolina than it was actually in Florida. But we're all vulnerable is the point. And so this exercise and this conversation is to lift up how one community, in this instance Miami, is thinking about how to protect itself in a very vulnerable part of the country. And then the two Marias are going to help us understand something about weather patterns, climate disruption, displacement of people, and the role of cultural memory. So it's kind of what the humanities, in a sense, bring to this conversation. If you go back and think in terms of cultural memory, 2 generations ago, maybe 3, we'll say 60, 70 years ago, people never would have built in these places. They knew not to. But the way policy has played out to enrich the rich, your tax money, my tax money, subsidizes all of this.
And I find it really interesting that you started off with quoting the geography of risk in terms of this very fractured approach, right, where the individual municipality or the individual community is being asked to deal with this, to figure it out. So what happens if you're not in a big institution like UNC, which has resources? You know, what happens when there's cultural heritage in small local repositories that don't look like what you think an archive looks like: a public library, a historical society, a court, a home. Sometimes the memory keeper is a person. Here in North Carolina, in vulnerable communities that are prone to flooding, we see with every passing storm, with every rising water, more and more cultural heritage and archives and documentary heritage being destroyed. Not just the displacement of people, but the erasure of memory and of people from a landscape. And so we have to think about our work beyond what we call the custodial model, right? Which is give us your stuff and we now own it, we take care of it, we do the work. We have a lot of expertise, a lot of know-how. How do we connect that knowledge and that expertise with communities that want to keep their archives, that want to keep their documentary history, that want to retain the information, but help them have access to resources, to information on how to do that and how to do that well?